All right, and welcome to NFT Guild Roundtable number 15. Today we have a special guest, Quinn Parkinson, also known as Ancient Kraken on Twitter. Quinn is the lead Plutus and smart contract developer for DripDropz and Project NEWM. He graduated from the first Plutus training program and has written a considerable number of successful Plutus smart contracts. And he's here today to give us a whirl and introduction to himself and the success he's found around Cardano. And excited to have you, Quinn. And the floor is yours, sir.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate the time and the effort here. But yeah, I am the primary smart contract developer for DripDropz and NEWM. A lot of my work right now is probably on Project NEWM, just because we're advancing those contracts they have with them, and we're coming out with a new marketplace for them. So I've been doing a lot of work for that. And then DripDropz actually has a whole bunch of smart contracts kind of just sitting there waiting to be implemented that in a very typical way just kind of sit in a repo until eventually they get used. But yeah, I guess maybe I'll just kind of start talking about just the NEWM contracts and kind of go from there and just kind of see what happens. The NEWM contracts, it actually involves the tokenization and fractionalization of digital assets. In NEWM, it's applied specifically to streaming rights, but in general, it can be applied to anything, actually. That was apparently it's a brand new contract, even though it kind of was inspired by the original Fractadia contracts that came up from, I believe, Sebastian at DC Spark, but very long time ago, but with a different kind of purpose. I use something that I have in my repo actually called the sequential NFT generator, which is a state-based NFT generator for producing essentially an infinite amount of sequential NFTs. And we use that really heavily at NEWM, and actually some of my other projects that I'm working on right now at a Doja, we're actually using the same kind of tech. So it's actually a pretty convenient little thing. Recently, I actually got to meet with some members at IOG to help me transition it from a state-based minter into a stateless minter. So now you have like infinite scalable NFT generation. So that's really fun. I can probably get into that a little bit after this. But the idea at NEWM is that an artist actually comes in with their music, like their song that they produced, and we create an NFT with our sequential NFT generator, like NEWM 1, 2, whatever. And then the artist can choose to fractionalize this representation of their music, streaming royalty rights, into 100 million tokens that are then distributed with the prototype marketplace right now. Eventually, this will be an order book style DEX actually that I've created, and that's actually on the Project NEWM repo, but that's like, still a work in progress kind of thing. But yeah, that idea is it's a two-step process. I think I've come up with some ideas about how to make it a one-step process, but for right now, it is what it is, and it's really good. Yeah, that's a really fun one. It's an interesting application. Definitely for a lot of NFT projects, they need a way to just kind of have a machine that just produces NFTs. Maybe not so much as maybe like the typical NFTs that we see, where it's like an image and we're trying to sell it like an art-based NFT. Like actually, a lot of groups need sequential NFTs just for state representation. That we need a way to point to something that's unique, and it'll always be unique and potentially sequential, because it's nice to have numbers at the very end that kind of indicate which one you are. That happens a lot. But I'm pretty excited about that project. That's the pair of smart contracts is actually being audited, I believe, this week. They took money from Project Catalyst, and one of the milestones they had was actually getting like, I don't know, 40-50K from Project Catalyst to actually have the tokenization and fractionalization contracts be audited. So I'm really excited about that, because either I'm going to find out I know how to write smart contracts, or it's going to be a massive learning experience that I need to step up my game a little bit. But I feel pretty confident about them. It's, if you actually look at those contracts, it really is to the point of like whatever the attack vector on them is probably very clever and very like subtle and not so blatantly just I don't know what I'm doing kind of thing. But yeah, but hopefully in the next coming weeks I'll get a lot of movement on the order book that we're coming out, because NEWM wants a bunch of artists has fractional tokens that from creating their music. And then what they wanted to build was an order book style decks where we can trade the fractions against each other. And you can trade fractions for like ADA or for NEWM tokens or fractions for fractions. And basically the idea was, how do you create that order book marketplace in a very decentralized manner? And I kind of want to talk about that a little bit, because I think it exists. I think MusicSwap does a variation of this, but this is a contract that actually you place your orders into the book, because it's an order book, and then a bot actually sits on the back end and just fulfills orders automatically by scooping extra ADA off the top as the incentive. And then we are potentially going to create an additional incentive schema with NEWM tokens, but that'll happen later on. But our cool little trick is that it not only does full swaps, but it does partial swaps. And so it will eat out like a big UTXO and then resend it back to the contract to complete an additional order. And I think that actually is a new aspect. I don't know what other DEX does it. Maybe there's one out there that does, and I'm not, this isn't super original, but it should be really fun. If you're interested in how that is, definitely check out the repo for it, because, you know, it's an interesting aspect. Well, let's see what else. That's kind of what it is for NEWM right now. That tokenization contract will be applied to almost everything, because you can, it doesn't have to just be music rights. There's a legal aspect to it, but the idea that you're creating an NFT and then fractionalize it is a general solution that can be applied to anything. So that's actually really fun. We kind of transition from Project NEWM over to for DripDropz actually. Some of the code that I have for DripDropz actually involves general like token staking, as well as the vesting contract that's from Fund 5 or 6 or 7, I forgot which one, of Project Catalyst, where I actually got to create a vesting solution. And that's just been sitting around now, but that will probably be used to facilitate the team allocation for drip tokens. That we had a vote that went on, and the community voted that we were supposed to get a team allocation from these drip tokens. No one wants to hold on to all those tokens and just pass them out manually. That's like a horrible interaction and legal stuff. So the vesting contract will actually just be kind of the solution to that, where we can set up buckets for all the team members, and then you just linearly vest from this every month or two or something like that. We'll kind of come up with that later on. And then that is a kind of nice little solution there. And that was an actually community funded project, and hopefully we get to use it, because I can show others how to use it, and we don't need to have multiple vesting contracts here in the community. We can use one, and hopefully it's mine. But yeah, then our next one that we're kind of in the works on, which hopefully they don't get mad that I'm talking about it. It is an open source contract, so what are they going to do? It actually is the token vault. Is for a way to lock tokens or just arbitrary UTXOs inside of a contract for an amount of time, and then you have an off-chain reward mechanism that just is paying out individuals for locking NFTs. So you do like NFT staking and things like that. That seems to be kind of up and coming right now, with a new form of utility is to actually purposely lock something to get an additional reward for your locking. So that's actually kind of a fun thing. And then coupled to all that is like staking contracts, where you can now take ADA in a contract and stake it. You cannot do pledge as of right now, unless I'm completely missing something. You can only do delegation, which is fine, but it's kind of interesting. And that's kind of it for the DripDropz smart contracts, actually. A lot of the DripDropz functionality goes through Firehose, which is like a personal setup centralized solution. So it's like super fast and not necessarily a decentralized way. And then I actually have a third project that I'm working on, because we're actually just finishing it up. And it's actually the Adoja smart space place marketplace, where we are creating a 3D printer marketplace and complete ecosystem. So that actually uses the same idea as NEWM, where you have NFT generators, where you have designers, printers, and customers all interacting with a whole bunch of contracts, actually, where designers mint design NFTs that get placed into a marketplace that mints purchase order NFTs that can be sent to printers to be printed and shipped to you in the real world. So it's trying to connect blockchain and real life together in a way where you can actually have a physical item that you purchase via a smart contract that mints NFTs, actually. So hopefully that will come to light in the future. That's a major project, and it's not really just a single entity, but it's kind of fun to do. Let's see, what else do I really want to talk about? I feel like I have a lot of contracts, and I kind of, let's see what other ones I have. I actually, there's one contract that I really have, and I really like, and it's might be used in the future, and I call it the action reaction contract. It's actually a way to distribute tokens to a group of members and then have essentially a DAO where members can place their voting tokens into representatives, and then those representatives can vote on actions within other contracts based off how much of the voting token they have. And to me, that was one of the initial DAO solutions we had for NEWM, actually, where everyone who had, I don't know if it's going to be NEWM tokens, but for the argument, it might be good to say that, where we all put our NEWM tokens onto the representatives. And then when an artist comes and wants to mint a new song, the DAO itself triggers a smart contract. So hopefully that'll be really fun. There's a lot of really interesting things you can do with the action reaction contract, especially when you have staking contracts involved, because you can actually get a DAO to collect ADA into a contract that can then pool hop over time. And you could actually do this collectively, as well as pay out rewards via the DAO. It's kind of an interesting solution. There's probably other ways to do DAO voting that's fully on chain, but it seems to work, and it's actually kind of fun to do. You take your tokens and you give it to the representative, and they mint you IOU tokens that you then burn your IOU tokens to get your voting token back. And it's kind of a weird, like, what's the real token, what's the IOU token? But hopefully that'd be convenient later on, or it gets implemented either in a Dojo or a NEWM. It does work in terms of getting a group of members who have tokens to interact collectively to allow smart contracts to happen. Because in a Dojo, we're going to need a DAO to facilitate quality assurance, as well as how do you punish bad actors in a decentralized system. You're going to need a group of members who can do collective voting. And that seems like kind of, that seems a little bit it on my contracts. I have a lot more, but I don't want to just kind of keep randomly grabbing things. Do you guys have any questions, though? Maybe that we transition to that. It might be,
I think you've got one more, which is the Cogno contract.
I thought Cogno was going to be a really cool contract. I thought Cogno was like a data aggregation contract where you can create online profiles in your smart contract, probably with a DAO that issues verified NFTs. But it was just a way to do references, so you can do on-chain royalties with it, because you can create a Cogno royalty data that can be referenced, and then you have on-chain royalties. You can do profiles. You can do like a complete communication system. You can create like basically like a fully on-chain Twitter, because you can have Cognos, which is your profiles, and then tags, which are your posts. You can also, it was kind of a fun little thing. One of the big, really interesting aspects that I built for NEWM as an example was using the Oracle data point, where you can have an Oracle just constantly update one of the Cogno contracts. And then in your marketplace, you just reference that as the price feed. And then you can sit there and be like, I'll sell you the N amount of tokens, but only based off the price in the Cogno reference. And then using your action reaction contract, I can issue you NFTs from my sequential NFT generator to make that Cogno official within our respected ecosystem. That one I thought was going to catch on and be like a really cool little thing. And then no one really uses it. For some reason, I'm doing like on-chain royalties. It's tricky because of basically, how do you handle situations where you have less than the minimum ADA payouts for royalty fees and stuff like that? I need to solve that, and that will probably get solved in the next couple of months. Actually, I have some ideas about it. But yeah, if I can solve the small payout problem, I can probably do fully on-chain royalties with it. But hopefully I want to keep working on that. I tried to make my own website with Cogno. I just horrible at web development, and it's just like the most noob thing you can ever see in your life. But maybe in the future I'll just pay someone who has skills in web development to make that, because I actually thought it'd be really fun to do like a fully on-chain Twitter, because you can do it all on the chain actually with just not even on metadata, like actually inline datums, and on your CLI you can basically have this fully decentralized message board essentially. Maybe it might be too expensive, you have to make your post count, no spamming. But yeah.
Cost to speak. Go ahead.
You mentioned that Cogno could be used for on-chain royalties. Could it be combined with the fractionalization contract potentially to create fractionalized royalties? Because that's something we've been exploring.
Potentially, the Cogno, the royalty data point allowed for a list of payout addresses. So the idea was to have a bucket that gets accumulated ADA, let's say, and then you can hit an endpoint that pays out everyone's percentage evenly in this case, because I haven't done that. But maybe the idea is pay out on how much a user holds or a representative holds. Maybe that's the idea. And also that royalty endpoint allows for arbitrary token payouts. So you can pick maybe stable coins or NEWM or Kopi and have that be your royalty payout. Kind of like, just more of an alternative currency like take on it, and not always pure ADA, because there's a problem with token sales right now is we based everything in ADA. But what happens when there's a marketplace that allows for arbitrary token sales, like what NEWM will have? We have fractions for fractions. How do you actually do royalties payouts when the tokens aren't the base currency? So you need a way to do on-chain royalties where someone can select what type of currency they want to get paid in. But yeah, so maybe that's an interesting idea. Maybe that there's a way to keep adding to it where you could fractionalize the right to own the royalty payout, and then you pay out based off how much you actually hold in a wallet. Maybe that might be an idea. I could see that going. The tricky part to that is you need to know what is the real one. And this is where the action reaction contract comes in, because you need some type of entity to issue NFTs so someone can point at that UTXO and be like, hey, that's the official one, not this fake one over here, but that's the real one. And that's like kind of the tricky part is like, who's going to regulate that? Who really wants to be a part of that? It sounds like it's going to be kind of a boring job, but you need it to be somewhat automated, I think. But that's like one little trick to it. But I mean, all the parts are there. If you actually look at the repo, I have the code for the DAO code. I have the way to do NFT generation. You got the data aggregation. Like all the pieces to the puzzle just need to be kind of put together in a massive, huge ecosystem of just like how to do fully on-chain everything. Yeah.
How and why would the contract be confused about fake tokens or real tokens?
Because you only reference a UTXO. And so you could create a UTXO in this contract with your keys on it and your royalty data. Well, then I'll just see it and make a new UTXO that copies every single thing on yours except with my payout address. How do I know which one's real? And so if I actually issued you with a DAO token and said, the holder of this NFT is the true owner of the royalties, then on my reference in my contract, I can say, oh, give me the reference UTXO. Hey, you're not holding that NFT, get out of here. And it'll just fail. And then you would do it again, but point at the UTXO that holds the correct NFT. And then it'd be like, yep, you have the DAO NFT, you're the real one, and we know you're true and not lying because you hold something that's truly unique, and I can point to it on chain. That's where it gets tricky, because if not, you basically run into who can spam the most and trick the most with like weird attacks where you try to do like a man in the middle kind of thing where you get someone to sign the wrong transaction that points to your data and not someone else's data. And or Oracle feeds, I need to give you the real price. What if someone purposely creates another additional Oracle feed that has fake data prices so I can front run the contract knowing that I'm creating the data points? So you need to prevent that. And how you prevent that is hold a special NFT that I give you. And if you can prove that that's a true NFT, then I can always point to it on chain. It's unique.
Yeah, got it. Makes sense.
Sense? It really just spreads tax, yeah.
Yes, with us, you have more questions. I'll let you begin. One smart contract developer to another.
Yeah, but yeah, so we'll see how it goes. About the NFTs in the NEWM, the music producers, they created a lot of fractionalization tokens, you said. Does it mean that if I were to buy a song, or is it then I get the tokens? So
right now, the artist comes in, we send their fractions to a bucket, and I need to finish the marketplace because eventually that will be on chain, and you would be able to just go and click like buy the fractional tokens. But right now we have basically this like centralized marketplace that orders all the incoming buy orders and just sends out your bundles out in a really fancy way. But essentially, yes. So there's just a bucket of fractions, and you come in and buy the fractions. No one has actually purchased the direct NFT because that would mean you have 100% of the streaming royalty rights, as if you owned all of the 100 million tokens. Usually, I think almost like I imagine pretty close to 100% of the users will probably go for the fractions. It does work forwards and backwards though. If you truly owned 100 million of those tokens, you could actually burn all of them and get the original token out. And if you wanted to, you could just burn that and just destroy the royalties altogether, which is kind of fun. I don't know why anyone would ever want to do that, but I wanted to make sure you can go in and out of the contract. Usually those fractions are pretty well distributed, and the possibility for it to be burned, probably zero. Someone's gonna have to buy a lot of those fractions. You know, the entire market they would have to own. Yeah, but yeah. But it is a button that you hit, and you can just buy those fractions.
Yeah. So is it one smart contract per album, or how is that?
No. So you have one contract, which is I call them lock and mints. This is the state-based version of this, where you see the contract with, and it's going to be NEWM 0. And then an artist comes in and says, hey, there's a whole bunch of metadata and very important legal things that have to go on before these NFTs are permitted. But essentially, they come in, here's my ADA, can you please mint me a token? We click over on the token factory, essentially, that mints out NEWM 0. That goes into a fractionalization contract, where you then hit a fractionalized endpoint, and then that turns into 100 million. There is, I believe, a way to do it in one step, but you don't get the fun NEWM 1 names, which I really like. It's kind of the trade-off. If you want cool names, you got to do with the state. If you don't care about the names, there's totally a way to do it where you can do it in one step. But yeah. But no, it's not a per contract thing though. There is a singular contract that does. We thought of it as catalogs. So the NEWM catalog is all the tokenized songs that will eventually be fractionalized. But in that contract, you can create new catalogs by issuing new NFTs, or technically they'll be fungible tokens, but each UTXO holds one of them. So that's another way to prevent bad actors is, I want to create a token. You only can spend the token that holds the NFT. And then that's like a hard thing into the contract, so no one could like mess around with it. And we had a whole ceremony minting that NFT. We did like a multi-sig. And like, yeah, it was fun.
Hey, great, thanks. When I had a look at your repositories, I found a contract that was called Fracada, and it's about fractionalizing all of the NFTs as well. And I, from what I could understand, for example, if I had my house as an NFT on the blockchain and I wanted to split it to multiple owners, then they get one fraction each of that NFT.
The Fracada was from DC Smart, because that was the initial idea, was we were going to fork off of that and just create our own version of it. But then I kind of was like, well, I'm trying to remember how exactly it works. I believe you compile each contract uniquely for the fractions, where what we wanted was just like, can you solve the problem of creating a smart contract that just infinitely created NFTs? Because if you solve that problem, well, then just create a contract that says, hey, send the NFT in, hit the fraction button, and take the 100 million out and just make it go backwards. And you kind of have the same idea without having to generate a new contract for every single user. And you can really just have like the NEWM thing. But your fractional ownership idea, you could totally do that. Imagine having a NEWM catalog that was called NEWM houses, and you could really tokenize your house and then fractionalize the ownership and sell the fractions of your house. Here's the thing, like, this is smart contract, really simple. You can do that. The legality of making that happen, like, and especially in America, you're blowing my mind, and I don't know if that's going to happen. There's a real disconnect in the real world and the blockchain world, and it's tricky to get it like real and, you know.
Yeah, of course, and but that's the future of the blockchain. So let's that can happen in the future.
Oh yeah, definitely.
But, yeah, but if we go that way and we have a house or have some fractions of the house, and then one of the fraction holders lose their NFT, or it's sent to a burning contract, what happens then?
That'd be interesting. Well, because the idea is you need a single wallet, or at least a single transaction, must hold all the 100 million of these tokens, and that is a singular burning action. So you can't partial burn. That was I was thinking about it, and it might be a weird attack for someone to do that. So someone has to technically own the entire house in this example to be able to retrieve back the original NFT token. And also, it might be a weird thing to fractionalize a house, because when do I get to live in it? Like in January, we need a January token, you know? Someone's got to own the December token kind of thing. And it can almost be like a timeshare where you can like break it into like little weeks or something. And I imagine you'd have to do a little bit different of a contract, where instead of minting 100 million fractions of ownership, you actually mint like weeks or months of tokens, and then you can buy time of the ownership, so you can go and visit it. Unless I'm just owning the building and own the building, I guess. I mean, that probably happens. Yeah.
Great. Yes, I see your point. Well, you also mentioned the possibility to stake NFTs. And I was wondering then, what is the value that you are actually staking? What are the rewards calculated by? Is it the NFT value, or what is behind it?
How they were initially doing, the idea is you could incentivize users to take your NFT, whatever that might be, and then incentivize it with drip. Saying we made DripDrop NFTs. If you staked your DripDropz NFTs in our contract, we can give you like a bonus to your drip rewards every epoch. So like a multiplier. That's what we were thinking about, where like, we'll make it a drip NFT, but if you own the drip NFT and staked it, instead of getting 1,000 drip every epoch, you got 2,000 drip every epoch, and you can stack the rewards and have it like kind of degen, kind of fun. But that was kind of like the idea. Or open it up where maybe other token distribution, like other token companies can say, hey, I actually already have a bunch of NFTs. Can you help facilitate the reward mechanism where I have a bucket and I can reward all my users for staking their NFTs for maybe some fungible token, or maybe version 2 of their next NFTs or something like that. Especially if they don't have like a burning mechanism, they can actually technically perma time lock it and be acting as if it was a burning mechanism to issue new NFTs. There's a lot of like, it was designed to purposely be kind of off-chain heavy, so the reward mechanism is kind of like whatever you want it to be, and it wasn't like a really kind of strict thing. Though you could couple it together with a fungible token generator, which I also have, where upon unlocking a time-locked UTXO in the stake, it issues you amount of fungible tokens of a finite distribution. So the initial stakers get the most rewards, and then the end stakers get less rewards. And then you can create your own token distribution by that. There's a lot of fun little things you can do. I do want to make that one day, you know.
Yeah, but yeah, now that you describe it, it makes much more sense. I didn't see it as clearly as you describe it, so thanks for that. Yeah, anyone else?
Yeah, we were kept thinking about the royalties smart contract, because that would be very good to do on chain if we can get it as close to on chain as possible. And another thing that you mentioned in the pieces of the puzzle being there, they just need to be put together. I thought that would be for some project, maybe not for all, but for some, having the vesting contract tied into the royalty contract. You see that as being a possibility, for instance? So we're only going to take out our royalties if the project is, I don't know, whatever the amount as successful.
Yeah, you definitely could. I think like the biggest issue for me for the royalties right now is not that you can't do them fully on chain. There's definitely is a way to do it. It's what happens when I sell my 5 ADA NFT and I'm supposed to get 10% of that. Where do I put the, you know, tens of thousands of Lovelace? Like, where do I put that? How do I actually put that into a contract without me losing ADA and making that an attack vector? Because now someone has to pay the extra min ADA. It's basically trying to solve that problem. But you could, I mean, that'd be kind of interesting, like have the vesting contract be the bucket, and then you can vest out all of it. It kind of depends though, because what if your royalties are like 1.2 ADA? It's like, all right, here's your 1.2 ADA vested over 10 years. Like, all right, that's like useless. No one really cares about that too much. But then again, if you have like really high priced royalties, like something that's getting sold for thousands of ADA, that stuff adds up, you know, like you really want to maybe set yourself up for a nice little payout every day, or you can just have a huge paycheck. You know, or just design the contract where you can pick out only sub little bits. And you don't really need to worry about the vesting, like the time investment stuff. The time investment was to prevent market dumps, really. So you can only get little chunks per unit time, and then not one individual can take their however million or whatever we get and just instant dump it. They have to only be able to sell little bits over time. That's what the vesting contract was primarily designed for. Just try to not kind of screw over the community too much.
But when you say that royalties can be done on chain, you're referring to through a smart contract, not on the base level of the ledger.
Right? No, you have to be through a contract. So you would so you had like a standard like 10K drop that you're trying to do. On all of those minting transactions, you fed the Cogno royalty data with an NFT another NFT that you're creating from from the DAO that allowed this. And the problem is like, let's say I had a marketplace, I would have to issue the NFTs to know what royalties are real. Because if not, who's the one creating that? Because then it would have to be a DAO that everyone can participate in. Because if not, well, then I already compiled my contract. How do I point to the reference thing now? And now it becomes a new attack vector, because what I just put that into the datum of the redeemer. Well, that can be faked. It needs to be kind of hard coded. And so it is a little tricky. It might be where I want to have royalty information. Okay, I'll create my royalty information for marketplace A and marketplace B, and hopefully they're all the same and someone trusts that. It is a little tricky. You know, that's a little bit of an issue with it.
So marketplaces would need to essentially plug in to this smart contract. And
yeah,
are you envisioning one smart contract per project or one general smart contract for?
Well, see, that's the, if you get a big enough of the community together, you could create like a true DAO where you use the finite supply token generator that I made. There's 21 million, let's say, just like Bitcoin, and no one gets paid for this. You just keep buying this token, and that's the true DAO token. And then we all collectively get this token, and we make one DAO contract that allows these NFT generations. Then we can all say, hey, what's the official DAO policy? Well, it's this one that we're all contributing to. Cool. What's the, now that one DAO policy can be used in many different contracts, but it's one token that we got to point to. The problem is what happens when there's multiple DAOs issuing multiple royalty tokens. And now you're like, well, which one's the real one? I didn't put that one in my contract. I can't represent your on-chain royalties. And now it's like, okay, now you need a contract to hold references of how many reference tokens you need a reference to. And then it's just like, it becomes just like a nightmare of just like, okay, this is at a certain point, a contract's going to be compiled and that's it. And you're not going to be able to represent new royalties or something. So it gets a little tricky in that aspect. And it takes a big collective. I wouldn't want to be the one issuer of it. I would like it to be a massive ecosystem-based DAO that can all contribute to this. But then it costs a lot of money. Someone's got to have the mint ADA for all those mints. Someone's got to hold it all. Someone has to be the hotkey in the representative to mint these things. And it's massive. It's not just this trivial thing.
Would it be possible to set up the contract in such a way that it would take the mint price into consideration, for example? And let's say if someone sells below mint price, he wouldn't have to pay royalties.
Yeah, I think you would do that in the reference UTXO. You would like upon minting, be like, hey, it costs 10 ADA to mint. That data is on the datum. So when you reference it, I can then check, hey, how much ADA did you pay for it? Or how much ADA are you paying for now? Cool, you're good to go. But that doesn't solve well, what happens when I sell this token for JED? Well, what's that? How do I, like, how much JED did you pay? Well, I only paid ADA. Well, I guess you'll get no royalties. And you have a way to circumvent royalties, because if your royalty is only in ADA, well, then just sell it in JED and you completely circumvent all on-chain royalties. And it kind of goes back to, what are we trying to solve to make sure royalty payments are always paid? Because there would be ways to circumvent it. And what are we really going for? Maybe we just should have it be off-chain and have the marketplace respected. Because if not, I'll just create a marketplace where you can only trade non-ADA tokens, and then it circumvents all royalties. You know, it's, what do you actually do? How do you actually solve that problem? Personally, I think the off-chain royalties are just being respected solves the problem. Kind of like what Token did, one of the marketplaces that I worked on. Like, we did off-chain royalties, and we just said, hey, we are respecting CIP 25. We're going to do it, you know, and no one really complained. It seemed to solve the problem. It only gets funky when you have someone being like, well, what happens if, you know, you don't do that? Then it's like, well, it's on us. Hate us then. I don't know. Like, it's a tricky problem. It's not really something that's like, I don't know. Or you have to say, I bought it in ADA, and then you have to use this oracle that translates your fungible token ADA price into something that's usable, which also is Cogno. So inside the Cogno system, you could have your royalty data and your oracle price data. So if you had a token that was traded, you could simultaneously use an oracle price fee to convert your fungible token sale into your true royalty payout in ADA sale. it just now that transaction just becomes really expensive and insanely like complex. And it's like, all I want to do is just sell this thing for 10 ADA. Like, why do we have to jump through all these hoops just to sell my damn NFT? But I think like, and technically it could be done, and it's just a massive undertaking.
Yeah, the Oracle feed was about to be my suggestion, because I guess if you reference the initial mint price, then you solve the problem that you were being earlier with the minimum ADA. What happens if you need to pay 0.5 ADA, where that essentially wouldn't happen, because at least if we're assuming at least a minimum price of a mint price of 10 ADA. If you have a royalty set to 10%, maybe if it's lower, it still could happen. Yeah.
Yeah. And also you get into a situation where not like who's running the Oracle feed, you know? Are you running the Oracle feed, the owner of the one who wants to get the royalties? Well, then you're just going to change the Oracle feed to make you get paid more. Now we need a centralized solution that's providing Oracle data that can be verified on chain. And it, yeah, I think one of the ideas I had for the min ADA problem was maybe inside Cogno, you create a holder with like 2 ADA, and then when you spend it and add on to it. So the spending transaction is the min ADA you need to add a little fractional token to it. That might be the solution. It just might get expensive. That's about it. Because I don't want everyone to pay 2 ADA just to sell something. I want to make it cheap and fast and not this horrible, expensive fame that everyone has to deal with.
Do you think there would be a simpler solution if there would be a general sale smart contract for the entire Cardano ecosystem, or not forcibly, but for whoever wants to participate, and then marketplaces could build their own flavor on top of that? How do you think that could work?
I mean, I think the problem there is just trying to get however many developers and how many users to collectively say, okay, everyone, we'll use this thing. And then if you actually look at the ecosystem, it's like, that's not going to happen. I created a vesting solution, and there's like 3-4 more vesting projects that came out of Catalyst. And it's like, why are they funding something that was already done? We can just build it once and not have to use it again. And that means there's going to be many flavors. So even when we picked one, someone's going to be like, I don't like vanilla, I want chocolate and strawberry. And then next thing you know, you have all these different variations of it. And you're trying to, yeah. And I was just thinking actually in my head, what happens when there's a marketplace that allows bundled UTXOs to be offered for bundled UTXOs? How do you do royalties on that? What happens when there's so many problems to this that makes it so tricky. And I think this might be one of those things where it's like, we all agree that respected off-chain royalty payments are the solution, I think we actually kind of solve the problem without making a huge headache for ourselves or an additional whole lot of work. Like maybe that's just kind of the trade-off. But I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'd rather have a respected off-chain than what some of the current solutions are, which are not respecting CIP 25, but that's my opinion. Yeah.
27, I think.
26. Wait, I keep saying 25. What's 20? Wait, is it 27?
25 is the actual NFT metadata, the first.
Oh,
NFT
dude,
metadata.
20. Yeah, no, I keep sorry. That was the one I was thinking of. Oh, I have to redo this whole conversation now.
And 27 is the one for royalties.
Yeah, because that one, it's like even well, the number one, not to talk down, but even the number one marketplace right now doesn't technically respect CIP 27. If they just default to 1 ADA payout, so you could game it and sell all your NFTs for really, really low and always get more ADA for your royalty than what's actually allocated to your royalty payment. And that's not technically respecting CIP 27, and somehow no one really cares about that. but a token just gave you the actual payout on an off chain, and everyone nowhere complained. And so we just didn't give you 1 ADA if it was less than the min at UTXO. What do you want is better? You know, do you want to be able to game it, or do you want the actual payout?
I think no one's noticing because of the low price of ADA, so 1 ADA doesn't really matter at this point. But next,
hey, we go back to the all-time. Yeah, I was like, it might matter later on, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they actually solved bundled royalties on
token
on JPEG.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I remember. How do they do it? I honestly really, for much of the NFT projects I make, I rarely trade NFTs. Like I just make smart contracts.
We were the recipient actually of a royalty from a bundled sale. So we're not sure exactly what went on behind the scenes, but we can send you the transaction link after this call to take a look at it. So because obviously the bundle is referencing multiple UTXOs, it's not just one, and then the price applies for the whole bundle, but I don't know if they did some UTXO splitting. It wasn't anything usual, and I know this by the fact that the aggregators that pick up the API data from JPEG Store, like OpenSea NFT.io and CNFT tools, their bot didn't display the royalties correctly. They displayed the royalties as if only one token had been sold, but actually in the bundle there were, I think, 10 tokens. 10 tokens.
Yeah, because on token we did it where you just priced every token in your bundle individually, and then when you did the royalty payout, you already knew exactly what you were going to get. And because if not, you can run into these weird logical conundrums with selling really low percentage royalties and really high percentage royalties, and who gets what kind of thing. So I'm really curious how that's implemented. It might be able to be gamed as well. So that'd be kind of fun.
Well, I remember, I think your bundles, the token bundles, allowed for multiple collection bundles. So maybe that's referring to high royalties and low royalties. But the way JPEG Store did it is that you can only bundle NFTs from the same collection. So from the same policy.
That makes sense.
Automatically the same royalty rates for all the tokens.
Yeah, that makes sense. There's still an issue open on the card. I use a Plutus or Cardano node that I have that describes why you would want one collection with many tokens and not n collections with n tokens, because there's a tricky little non-linear effect that happens. But you can do it with any arbitrary tokens. You just can't do too many. You get like 10, maybe. Some of the contracts I have like max out at like 20. You know, it's the min parameter. At a certain point, you just max out that, and there's nothing you can really do about it. We've been given a language to do arbitrary computation and then limited by the number of memory units you can use. So it's not really arbitrary computation, it's just a small set of it. Yeah.
Very nice. All right. Well, I'm heading out. You guys enjoy.
Yeah.
Good talking to you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Quinn, it was good to meet you and hear your brilliance. Until next time, sir.
My rambles, yeah.
Yeah, the world. Thank you for it.
Absolutely.
Maybe you'll be motivated to join Space Place now, Peter.
Maybe if Quinn's there, yeah.
I show up every once in a while. It's we shouldn't even mention Space Place on here. Well, yeah, you have any other questions? I mean, kind of almost at our hour time limit anyway.
Yeah, I must say that I got all the answers that I needed, but I must say that I really enjoyed going through the contracts that you have, and there are so many possibilities. So I see a lot of influence that I can learn and develop on in the future using your contracts. So
I would say one catch is my code style is very unorthodox. It's not to standard notation. So that's the only catch. It all works, but it's definitely it's not stylistically beautiful. It's just me making what I think looks good.
Sure.
But yeah.
Of course, all of the different ideas that you bring to the table is nice to read through and to influence by. So great job.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Just as clarification before we maybe wrap this call up, you mentioned, so obviously the topic was open source smart contracts, but you initially started the conversation with NEWM and DripDropz tokens. So not the ones specifically in your repo, in your personal repo. Are those open sourced as well? Or
yes, they are actually. So I believe on my GitHub profile page, Project NEWM and a Doja and the DripDropz, which I just have, those are just on my repo. All of those are going to be open source. Especially Project NEWM has made a very legitimate promise to try to be as open source as possible with their tech. Doja has always been open source because it's how it works. And then DripDropz, I use that on my own personal repo, so they're just kind of hidden throughout. It doesn't really explicitly state DripDropz solution, but it's just stuff we're going to be using. So I think pretty much everything that I'm willing to publicly put out is open source. Just kind of go and look for it. It's probably hidden somewhere in that repo. I don't think I can't really think of any explicit project right now that's not open source, actually. But maybe there'd be one in the future. No. I like having my stuff open source. I can reference it later, you know.
So they're all linked through your personal repo.
Yeah, if you actually on the LogicalMechanism, I'm gonna check right now just to make sure. I think if you actually go to the profile, there is on my custom pins, there's the Project NEWM contracts and then the Doja contract. Excuse me, and the Doja contracts. Those are the holders of all of those contracts, so we can like separate them out. But yeah, all the contracts that I spoke about today are open source as of right now, and hopefully in the next couple months I'll be bringing out some new things and keep adding to the repos.
And it's a good thing that, like you mentioned, that the contracts will not only be open source, but I think very rarely in the open source space they'll also be audited.
Yeah, it gets a little expensive. I mean, it's not cheap. But you know, having more audited contracts, because you got to understand, when I audit one of those open source contracts, that knowledge is now going to get passed to all the other contracts, and then we all kind of build up from there. But hopefully more will get audited, and just the trustiness of it, and just it's more confidence using it, and not just, especially if you are not really tech savvy with Plutus and stuff, and you're looking at a contract being like, well, I don't know what's going on. If you had an auditor be like, hey, we looked at it too, this is our jobs, and there's actually a very legitimate contract, I think that gives like the user some more, a little feeling in their heart that they're not going to get scammed. But I don't make scam contracts. I make very legitimate contracts.
But how is the process with the audit going? I mean,
we're actually beginning like this week. Like I'm waiting for them to actually send a message back. But apparently, we basically give them access to the repo. They're gonna either fork it and just do their own internal tests, and then they come back with a report and just be like, "Hey, these are the things we found. Fix them." And then I fix them and I send it back, and it kind of just recursively goes like that until they give us the okay.
Okay, so they are actually technical people. They understand how to build, and they read the code and understand the code.
Oh, I hope so. I've been paying them enough money for them to be kind of hey man, if I pay them the amount of money we do for them just to be like, yeah, I looked at it, that's fine. That'd be kind of bummed.
Yeah,
Well,
but
actually-
I was thinking that they perhaps only asked you questions, and then you needed to prove or answer the questions that they had, for example.
Oh, no. Most companies that I spoke to, like we didn't go with M Labs, but I've spoken with M Labs a couple of times. They have their own internal testing things. They're going to take that contract and just run it through all their code and algorithm stuff, and it spits you out with like, hey, here's all the attack vectors. Fix them.
Great.
Yeah.
Actually, it's we're all paying for that audit because it's funded by Project Catalyst.
Yeah, that is a Project Catalyst funding
from our taxpayer ADA, right? So
yeah, that is. And so no, it's good because it is an open source thing. So if any project wants to create tokens with this method after that audit, like that's good to go. You know, like that's something you can just use. Yeah, it's fun, enjoyable.
definitely adds some value to the contracts. I mean,
yeah,
not that
it's like a stamp.
Not that you're not a developer, but for those who don't know you personally.
Hey, just a face in a repo sometimes. That's all it is. All right.
Well, this has been a very informative conversation. If you have any last questions, Sense, or anything to add, Quinn?
I'm good. Thanks a lot for the talk.
Yeah, absolutely. I really enjoyed this. Get to talk about myself for now. That's always fun. No, I really appreciate you having me here, and hopefully this more and more users will kind of be aware of some of the contracts we're coming out with, and a lot of new Plutus developers can be like, how do you write code? Like, hey, I got a whole bunch of contracts you can just look at and learn from, and see how I'm approaching the solutions and kind of go from there. There's only so many open source repos you can really go to and get Plutus contracts. So I'm glad that I'm hopefully one of the primary ones. Probably not. There's a lot more, but I'm like hidden. No one knows who I am. I'm just here in the background.
Well, you are the lead smart contract developer for two of the bigger Cardano projects, I would say, and that's the whole idea to get the idea behind this roundtable was to help popularize, maybe to the best of our abilities, the work that you've done and point new developers in the direction of your repo.
Well, there's going to be some fun stuff coming out this year, so we can, I'll leave it there because of MBAs, but yeah, there's some fun stuff. All right.
Thanks a lot for agreeing to do this, and
thanks.
See you in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. All right.